Hey, what's going on, guys? Earlier today was the UFC 2024 seasonal press conference, which featured the main events for UFC 297, 298, and 299. So you had Sean Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis, Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria, and Sean O'Malley and Marlon Vera all up on stage for a press conference. It was a very eventful press conference. It was a WWE-esque press conference, but I mean, it was very notable. There was a lot of crazy stuff said, and we're going to break it all down in this video. And I think there's going to be a lot of people clutching their pearls over this press conference. And I think a lot of people are going to be kind of shocked by my reaction. But before you go down in the comments and say, Joey, you're such a hypocrite, make sure you listen to the entire video. That's all I ask. Then you can freely comment, Joey, you're a hypocrite, blah, blah, blah. But let's just say you had Sean Strickland, just to kind of preview the whole thing. You had Sean Strickland throwing out homophobic slurs. You had Dricus bringing up people's parents and abusive relationships. And you had Strickland talking about O'Malley's wife. And you just had people crossing the line left and right. But if I had to give like an overall opinion before I break it down in detail, what I took away from this press conference was basically Dricus kind of embarrassed Sean Strickland. You had Sean Strickland, who embarrassed O'Malley and embarrassed Colby Covington as well. And then you just kind of had O'Malley just lackluster. Marlon Vera had some funny moments. And then, basically that was the gist of the entire press conference. The main press conference was Strickland and Du Plessis. And then Volkanovski and Topuria, borderline might as well have not even been there. Honestly, I'm embarrassed that Volkanovski had to fly all the way over from Australia to be there for this press conference. He barely talked the entire press conference. Now, before I get into going in kind of chronological order, I want to cover a couple things that were just kind of minuscule details that I want to cover in this video. Dana White confirmed a couple events. He confirmed UFC 299 for Miami. Somebody asked him that. O'Malley tweeted that out. Dana White confirmed it. He was kind of annoyed by that. He confirmed UFC 300 for April 13th, most likely in Las Vegas. And lastly, he confirmed that the UFC will be returning in 2024 to the UK, Ireland, and Mexico. And then also, in terms of Volk and Topuria, I'm not going to talk about him too much in this video. Basically, Volk was cheered. Topuria was booed. You had Topuria saying O'Malley was a piece of shit and then talking some shit in Spanish, and then the translator's trying to translate it. Doesn't translate it fully because it's kind of awkward for him talking shit. Marlon Vera says, translate it right, get your shit together. And then the translator kind of translates it a little bit better and saying, oh, when I drop you, you're going to be head level with my nuts. And then, it's just one of those things where O'Malley kind of responds. It's a little bit cringy. O'Malley has no charisma. I'll say that right now. For a guy who people portray as this massive star because he has weird color hair and tattoos, dude lacks charisma. He had like one or two funny moments throughout this press conference, but for the most part, I mean, he just drops the ball every press conference. And I've been saying it for a while, like, you can have fighting ability and you can become a star, but for people already acting like he's some big star, he's not. He doesn't have the personality just yet to kind of make up for his lack of kind of resume or the work that he's done in the sport. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video, because O'Malley does have a couple back and forths with Sean Strickland in this as well. But basically that's it for Volk and Topuria. I'm not going to be really talking about Volk and Topuria again. I'm actually sad that Volk, if Volk did travel, if this was the only reason he traveled, that's a massive waste of time. He talked for maybe 30 seconds this entire press conference. Okay, now let's get into kind of chronological order. It started off with Strickland complimenting Dricus Du Plessis and just kind of saying, oh, he took out Whitaker. And he said, look, don't let your coach grab your dick, though, because there's that video of Dricus and his coach. And so Strickland kind of starts kind of just poking fun at Dricus. But Dricus, I'll tell you this, I didn't realize this. I don't watch a whole lot of press conferences. I just kind of started watching press conferences again recently. Dricus has really good trash talk. And I think he got the better of this entire press conference. But we're going to go through it. But basically, Strickland says, don't let your coach grab your dick when I'm in there. I don't want to see that across the cage. And, there's a lot of stuff that Strickland says in this thing that has, connotations surrounding it regarding, oh, I'm scared of homosexuals. That's basically what Strickland kind of portrays throughout this press conference. But DDP says, I don't think that's that bad of advice. He's complimenting Strickland and saying that we're going to have a hell of a fight. And it kind of starts off, for the most part, super respectable between Strickland and DDP. Strickland says either DDP is that good or Whitaker's that bad. And I think at one point in this press conference, there was something that DDP said that kind of triggered Sean Strickland. And that's when Strickland decided to start to ramp it up a little bit and start talking trash, because there was something that DDP said. I'm not talking about when he started talking about his dad or anything, but kind of in the middle of the presser that I don't know if a lot of people picked up on, that really kind of pissed Strickland off. But basically it starts off pretty respectful. Then they're asking O'Malley about how does he think the fans will be in Miami? Does he think it's going to be like half and half for him and Vera? And he says, I think it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of fans for Vera as well. It's not going to be the same as when I went to Boston, where Aljamain Sterling had 3 fans, and kind of takes a dig at Aljamain Sterling. And then O'Malley says, I'll be surprised if I don't KO Vera, and I'll be even surprised if I get hit. Then you have a dumb media member. Where do they get these guys saying, are you going to encourage Vera to throw a leg kick and get that out of the way? Like, who cares about that? Like, we get it. Vera finished him basically with a leg kick, and then O'Malley was stretchered out of the cage with no serious injuries. But what a dumb question. Vera was asked about it, and Vera just says, basically, O'Malley's the R word. He's basically, mentally ill, basically disabled. And then he says, O'Malley's the next Adam 22, which is actually a very good line from Marlon Vera. I don't know if he planned on saying that or if it just came off the top of his head. My guess is he probably, saw that online at some point and said, I got to use that at the press conference. And then you have Strickland ask the next question. And he's asked, how do you feel about going to Canada? And he kind of goes on a little bit of a tirade saying, I want to stay in the States. They sent me to Australia. Now they're sending me to Canada. And then he goes, why are you guys booing Marlon Chito Vera? He's a stand-up guy. O'Malley lets people fuck his wife, and starts going off on O'Malley, and it was kind of funny. And then Chito's kind of chiming in and laughing. And then you have O'Malley. And then basically this was O'Malley's funniest line, and it kind of fell flat. But I do think it was a decent line from O'Malley, but just the delivery was just kind of cringy. And O'Malley says to Strickland, at least my dad didn't fuck me. That's what he says to Strickland. I know this is crazy that we're even discussing these types of things, and basically says Strickland is insecure. Strickland kind of goes back at him and says, you're a clown, and happy dad really is, pleasing you, basically. And there's kind of just a little bit of back and forth. And then he says, go let some guys fuck your wife. And then that's kind of basically the end of it. O'Malley just doesn't even respond. He just kind of laughs it off. Doesn't really do much. Then you have Dricus asked about coming in as an underdog in this fight. And he says, basically, I don't care if I'm coming in an underdog. The people booing me right now. And then he kind of does this weird thing where he counts down and wants people to boo. And it's kind of this weird, awkward silence. Then some people boo. And he says, I'm going to change that to cheers when I step in the cage with Strickland. It's just a little bit awkward. Then you have O'Malley and Vera asked about Aljo saying that this fight makes no sense. Vera just says, I don't care what Aljo says. His own family doesn't want to even come watch him fight. And O'Malley says, Aljo's still concussed from when they fought before. Then you have a little bit of back and forth between O'Malley and Vera about beating Pedro Munoz. O'Malley saying it was a boring performance. And Vera says, well, you didn't even finish him. And he says, yes, I did TKO him. But meanwhile, it was actually an eye poke from O'Malley that stopped the fight. And he lost the first round before that. So then then Vera, after they discussed the Pedro fights between the two, basically says you have too much chemicals in your hair and you don't know what you're talking about. You're confused. Then it really starts to get into Dricus Du Plessis and Sean Strickland. And this is where I think the switch kind of flipped for Strickland, and he started to say, wait a second, is this guy insulting me? You had Dricus Du Plessis asked about his thoughts on the rise of Sean Strickland. And he basically says it wasn't really a rise. He got an opportunity and he took advantage of his opportunity. He went out there on short notice and beat one of the best in the world in Israel Adesanya. And it was kind of a backhanded compliment, because essentially what Du Plessis was saying was, Strickland basically got a gift from me because I couldn't fight Adesanya with an injured ankle, and he took advantage of it. But he didn't really deserve it. He didn't really deserve it because he didn't rise up the ranks. He didn't rise up and beat, top 10 ranked guys and get that title shot. Basically, Du Plessis was saying Strickland didn't deserve the fight against Adesanya. He got it by default, and he took advantage of it. And I think this is where Strickland really started to think, wait a second, is this guy insulting me right now? Then you had someone in the crowd yell at Du Plessis saying something about being scared, and Du Plessis kind of says, wait a second, what? And then he starts talking about how he'll finish Strickland, he'll go out there and beat him. And this is where it really starts to take a turn. Then you have someone ask Du Plessis whether he cares about taking the belt from Strickland or Adesanya. Du Plessis has the best answers. I'm telling you, Du Plessis really killed this press conference. And I know people, when I defend some of his actions later in this video, I know people are going to call me a hypocrite. I'm trying to go through this fast. I don't want to make this video too long. But basically Du Plessis says, I don't care who I take the belt off of. All I care about is getting the belt. Then Strickland was asked about the belt himself, and he says, I don't care about the belt. All I care about is making Du Plessis bleed. And then Strickland goes, he kind of starts to say, look, I'm going to talk trash back now. He says, look, we're going to fight. I don't have to be your coach. I don't have to grab your dick. And then he says, Dricus Du Plessis fought Whitaker and turned down the shot because of his ankle, because he hurt his ankle. He's too busy icing his ankle and couldn't take a title shot. Essentially saying that Dricus Du Plessis was kind of scared of stepping in and fighting Adesanya. That's kind of what he's implying, because Du Plessis did turn down the title shot and he said he had an ankle injury. And Strickland's like, you came out of that Whitaker fight uninjured. You were perfectly fine. You didn't take any damage. And instead I had to take the title fight because you didn't want to take it. Because again, Strickland was kind of annoyed because of that backhanded compliment earlier from DDP, where DDP kind of said, Strickland really didn't deserve the opportunity, but he took advantage of it. Then basically, DDP says, you never get the shot and you aren't a world championship caliber fighter and you won by a fluke. And this is when Strickland really starts to get annoyed. And Strickland starts to go, I walked through Adesanya and I'll walk through you. DDP said you didn't even finish him, which is a great comeback by Dricus Du Plessis. You didn't even finish Adesanya. What do you mean you walked through him? And to be fair enough, I know people like to over-sensationalize the win of Sean Strickland. It was a relatively boring fight outside of the first round. It wasn't like this crazy performance that everyone makes it out to be. It was crazy in the fact that everyone counted out Strickland, but at the same time, we can't sit here and act like he went out there and pulled off a TJ Dillashaw Renan Barão, which a lot of people are acting like. But once Dricus Du Plessis started to discredit Sean Strickland's win, that's when Strickland really started to get mad. And he said, I walked through him while you were icing your ankle. He says, that's some more. And then he says, DDP says, that's the height of your career, and you'll always remember that. Basically saying, listen, Strickland, you got this off of me because I couldn't fight, because I was injured. And now this is going to be the best moment in your career ever, and you'll never achieve it again. And that was a fluke win over Israel Adesanya, which a lot of people think Israel Adesanya really didn't show up. And I believe Du Plessis has said in the past that he really didn't think that version of Adesanya was the real version of Adesanya. And that's when they really start to go back and forth. And that's when Sean Strickland breaks out the homophobic slurs and says, go fuck your coach. Homophobic slur. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to get demonetized. I may already get demonetized for this video. And there's just some back and forth. And Dricus is saying, talking back to him. And then basically says, why do you look so sad, Sean? Why do you look so sad? And then this is when Strickland, him and DDP kind of stop talking trash. And this is when Strickland starts to go off about Colby. Kind of a media member asked him about Colby. I don't remember exactly what the particular question was. But this was the best moment for Strickland in the press conference. He says, let me give you some facts. And he starts talking about Colby. DDP interrupts him because of the previous banter and says, facts, dude, you can't even read. I don't know what necessarily those two things have to do with each other, but it was kind of just another little funny moment from Dricus Du Plessis. And Strickland goes on, doesn't even really respond to Dricus, and goes on about Colby and says, Colby effed everyone over he's ever known. Colby is a cunt, and making fun of Leon's dad was a big cunt move. Strickland just continue to go off on Colby, taking up for Leon Edwards, saying Colby is a fake pussy. And if he was standing next to me right now, and this was Strickland's best moment, this was his best moment of the entire press conference. If he was standing next to me right now, the only thing he would do is call 911 because he is the definition of a bitch. And I mean, Strickland just destroyed Colby Covington. Absolutely destroyed him, talking about how nobody likes him, how the way he attacked Leon Edwards' dad was super disrespectful, which is crazy foreshadowing to what's about to happen between Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis, and just goes off on Colby, calling him every name out of the book and saying, look, the only thing he would do is call 911 because that's what he does. He talks shit, and then when he gets confronted, he calls 911 and presses charges. And then after this, after he kind of goes on that tirade, then I think it's the schmo that asks another question about, is Dricus Du Plessis the biggest test for you? And Strickland, again, still heated from the previous banter, says, he beat Whitaker, but I would destroy Whitaker. He says, F Whitaker. Whitaker has a blitz and that's it. And he shut it down. And then Strickland says, I will perform a masterclass against Dricus when we fight in January. I'll walk through him. I probably won't get the finish, but I will beat him up for 5 rounds, like slams his hand on the table. And then Dricus Du Plessis is asked about South African fans, and then he kind of has an opportunity to respond to what Strickland said before. And he says, yeah, you won't finish me. I'm glad you know that. And that's when I knew this was already coming. Before the words even left Strickland's mouth, he says, I won't finish you, but your coach will in the back. And you could tell at this point Strickland's already angry. But then DDP's like, all right, now we're gonna take it to another level. You know, you're gonna continue to talk about my coach. You're calling me homophobic slurs and whatnot. And then this is when Dricus goes again, like, why are you so angry? And then says, you think your dad beat the shit out of you? Your dad doesn't have shit on me. Every childhood memory you have is going to come back when I'm in there with you. When you lay in bed at night and your dad comes in and beats the shit out of you, you'll basically remember that. And this was definitely crossing the line. 100% crossing the line by Dricus Du Plessis. And I think people misunderstood when I broke down the press conference from UFC 296. You can acknowledge that things are disgusting, that things are disturbing, but you can also not really be offended by it and not really be clutching your pearls over it. And I think Dricus Du Plessis here clearly crossed the line. But prior to Dricus crossing the line, I think Strickland crossed the line as well, calling him homophobic slurs, talking about his coach. And I get it. You could say, oh, that's all kind of satire and that's all jokes, where DDP bringing up Strickland's past, where apparently in Strickland's childhood he was abused by his father, that is taking it to a whole nother level. But the way I see it is, okay, and I said Colby took it way too far against Leon. Colby kind of came out of nowhere and just starts talking about someone's dead dad. There was a mutual escalation with Sean Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis. Sean's just up in the ante, Dricus is up in the ante, and then finally it comes to a boiling point where Dricus brings up his dad and says, you think your dad beat you? Your dad doesn't have nothing on me. When we get in that cage, I'm going to bring up repressed memories, is essentially what Dricus says. And while I'm not offended by this, while I'm not clutching my pearls over it, I understand why people would be. Because, I mean, this is a press conference meant to promote a fight. And when we start heading down this slippery slope, like, what's next? I mean, where are we going to get to next? Are we going to start talking about people's kids? Is that what's going to happen next? I just think it's disturbing. I think it's disgusting. But at the same time, I don't care, because these two were mutually escalating. And somebody like Sean Strickland, if you're going to continue to talk in the capacity that you talk, eventually someone's going to match that energy. You know, Strickland's going out there and talking about Adesanya, making up fan fiction about Adesanya and his dog, and talking all this shit online, making up shit about, you know, Ian Gary and his wife. And at some point, when you continue to do this and you continue to say ludicrous things, somebody is going to match that energy. And I feel like Du Plessis said, you know what? I'm going to match that energy right now. This guy thinks he's crazy. This guy thinks he's good at talking shit. This guy's going to call me homophobic slurs, talk about my coach, say all these disrespectful things. I'm going to ramp it up to level 10. And Strickland was pissed. And this is right around the end of the press conference. Strickland tells him, I'm going to take your soul. Then Dricus literally had like a memeable moment where he had this crazy, weird laugh where he laughs at him. Then Strickland calls him another homophobic slur and calls him a bitch. And then DDP says, looks like I hit a nerve. And you could tell Strickland says, yeah, you hit a nerve. And you could tell Strickland was pissed. And he's kind of like, I think he says at the end of the press conference, right as Dana starts to end it, like, you know, I want you to meet me after this, or something along those lines, or meet me after the fight, after I beat you at UFC 297 as well. And overall, this was just a crazy, crazy press conference. And I do think it did a good job of promoting 297. I'm going to be honest. I do think it did. I don't think the 296 press conference had anything on 297. But I will say, you know, while I don't appreciate stuff like this, I'm not a person that just sits down and enjoys grown men just throwing insults at each other. I used to be more into that, 5-10 years ago. But for me now, it's about watching the best fight the best. And if there is a real kind of beef between two guys, it does make the fight a little bit more enjoyable. And while I feel like this was kind of manufactured, I do think there is some serious kind of animosity now between Strickland and Dricus Du Plessis. But I think what all started off was when Dricus started to throw those kind of backhanded compliments, basically saying Sean Strickland was a fluky fighter and a fluky champion, and I'm going to go out there and wreck him. That's essentially what Dricus was saying. And you can tell Strickland loves this kind of newfound fame he has being the champion and getting all this attention, and everyone's, paying attention to his social media. And the fact that Dricus is kind of trying to undercut him and kind of just, make him look like he didn't accomplish what he accomplished. I think Strickland really started to take that to heart, and then it just started to escalate, and it got to a place, you could say it's the 7th layer of hair. You could say it got to that place, or a 7th layer of hell. But I'm not going to clutch my pearls over what Dricus said. I'm not going to really clutch my pearls over what Sean Strickland said. The homophobic slurs, it's crazy to me because there's no word out there that I particularly find offensive. But I've said in the past, look, if there's words out there that are deemed hateful to certain groups of people based on their skin, based on their sexual orientation, based on their religion, whatever it may be, I'm not going to sit here and applaud it. I'm not going to sit here and cheerlead it, especially in a public forum like some of these guys do. But I want to say this. A couple months ago, maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, I made a video where I mentioned people in fans, particular in the MMA community, applauding homophobia and different homophobic slurs. And I got so much crap. People in the comments saying, Joey, you're wrong. This doesn't exist. This never existed. And then a couple days later, it was all verified at UFC 293. And it's verified more at UFC 290. Well, not even 297. I was going to say 297 press conference. But at this seasonal press conference, it's verified even more that the fans just applaud this type of behavior. I think it's disgusting behavior. But again, I'm not going to go cry in a corner about it. I'm not going to clutch my pearls about it. But the reason I say these things is because nobody else is willing to say it. Every other YouTube channel or media member, they want to appeal to popular opinion. And they want to use that to grow their following on Twitter or their subscribers on YouTube. Or if they're media members, they kind of steer away from maybe discussing that because they're scared of stepping on fans' toes. I don't care about that. I basically am just an independent MMA YouTube channel who says whatever he wants because he's not worried about, I don't have to have the biggest following as quickly as possible. I don't have to make his money as much as possible. But I do think using this type of language and just encouraging this type of behavior of hate towards certain groups of people, I think it's disgusting and I think it deserves to be called out, especially when no one else is willing to call it out. Maybe if everyone else was calling it out, I'd be like, okay, we'll skip over that. We don't need to talk about it. It's already been covered. No one else will have the guts to say that. So at the end of the day, I want to sum this whole entire press conference up like this. O'Malley has no charisma and got embarrassed. He had one good line basically about, Strickland and, Strickland getting F'd by his dad, which really wasn't all that funny. That's kind of taking it too far as well. But again, if these guys are entering into kind of verbal warfare and going back and forth, I'm not going to cry crocodile tears for either one of them, especially when they're escalating it. Now, if one guy is kind of minding his business with mild trash talk and the next one brings out of nowhere their dead father, I think that's egregious. But if there's a mutual escalation over and over and over again, I'm not going to cry when someone brings up you're a victim of child abuse. And maybe that's wrong for me to say. I do think it's disgusting. I've said that multiple times, but I'm not going to cry about it. But basically, O'Malley has no charisma. Really was uneventful at the press conference. Vera had a couple funny moments where he called O'Malley Adam 22 and had the moment where he's kind of laughing with Strickland and they're talking about, different things. Strickland absolutely murdered Colby Covington. Dricus Du Plessis won this press conference. If you had to applaud one person, whether you want to say he went too far or not, Dricus Du Plessis absolutely dominated this press conference. He shit on Strickland multiple times. He got Strickland angry. He didn't get angry at all. And, it was just one of those things where I usually don't watch these. I watched this and I could not believe the display that Dricus put on. He had a response for everything. He was well-spoken. He wasn't stumbling over his lines. And when he needed to match someone else's crazy energy, he went out there and matched that energy. And overall, I think this was a crazy press conference. I'm glad I watched it. But let me know what you guys think about these press conference breakdowns down in the comments. Is this something you want to see more of on the channel? I'm genuinely curious. Let me know your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.